Nibs, we're here, baby. First show of 2025. Happy New Year. Even though we're a little late, Happy New Year to everyone joining us in the chat here today. First big show of 2025. David Benavidez winning an extremely impressive decision over the young, undefeated, relatively inexperienced David Morrell. A hell of a fight, a true shootout. I kept thinking that throughout the fight. This is a real shootout, but Nibs, give me some of your initial thoughts and reactions to Benavidez's win.
I think that David Morrell let me down, man. I was pitching a shutout on my picks up until the main event. But I tell you what, though, hats off to David Benavidez for just doing what he does, right? He came, he had a game plan, he executed it, and he was out there showing out. David Morrell, I think that you guys were right. You guys in the chat were right this time around. The inexperience showed itself, right? I think David Morrell was, for all the publications that are out there saying he was railroaded or that he got routed, I didn't see it that way. I think that he was always in the fight. I don't think he was ever in trouble being stopped. He's got the natural ability to bang with anybody in or around the elite of the class, right? I think the experience is what he needed to gain to be a better fighter. And I think that his corner did him no favors, right? His corner work was trash. David Benavidez's team was locked in, right? It wasn't just him as a fighter. His corner was locked in. You could tell his training camp he looked in some of the best shape I've seen him, and I don't know when. So it looked like it all came together. And, I think the sky's the limit for him. Do I think these two will meet again later on down the line? I do, because I think David Morrell is that talented. He'll come back around, and, we might see this again later. But I'll be honest with you, man. I really don't see anybody at 175, because I've seen Better Beef and Bivol, and I think, yeah, they might be able to give him some problems. But I think David Benavidez is really that Mexican monster, bro. He proved himself worthy of a nickname, and you know what? I'm a fan, bro. You're on mute, my guy.
We'll get to what might come next for Benavidez. But in terms of this fight, I think, like you said, the experience gap. Morrell thus far to this point in his career has just been substantially more talented, athletic, powerful than anyone he's gotten in the ring with. And a lot of the fights have just not lasted long enough to really require a game plan. And then against Hot Rod, he's getting some real, true professional resistance. He even loses the last couple of rounds of the fight because Hot Rod's an experienced contender. That was somebody much less talented with an experience edge that was able to figure some things out down the stretch. And so I think that was kind of the omen, is like, this guy is a supreme talent, but does he know how to establish and then, execute a game plan? And it seemed like there was a little bit lacking in a game plan, which, like you said, based on who was in the corner, you got Bob Santos, you got Ronnie Shields, you expect a little more. What were some of the things that you would have wanted to see in terms of the corner work?
I think they should have just been more honest with him, bro. He was losing that fight, and they weren't acting like it until it was too late to do anything about it, right? Like, even when he got the knockdown, albeit more of an off balance, knockdown, it was too little, too late. Like, but the thing is, and he was shelling up too much. I get it. You don't want to get dropped or hurt, but David Benavidez is a bad man. But you've got just as much, right? We saw every time he touched Benavidez step back. It takes a lot to be able to get David Benavidez to take a backward step, bro. And Morrell had that. So my thing is this could have been a much more entertaining fight than it was if Morrell had a more offensive minded game plan. Yeah, I respect the fact that you wanted to be smart defensively. but at the same time, you can't win a fight unless you're throwing punches, bro.
I think he just got overwhelmed, and I think some of like David Benavidez knows how to keep a pace that most guys don't want to keep or can't keep. Caleb Plant couldn't keep that pace. Even Vosdick couldn't really keep that pace through the first 8 rounds. Andrade couldn't keep that pace, even though he started well. Guys, he weaponizes his tempo. And I think that in the early stages, Morrell was cool going 50-50. And then you just start to lose that little edge come the fourth, fifth round. And that's where Benavidez kind of steps on the gas a little bit. And that's what makes a great fighter is he's got that next gear. Now, I will say I was surprised when Morrell hurt Benavidez in that fourth round. We've never seen Benavidez's legs get buckled like that. So it's the first thing, signs that we've seen in terms of can Benavidez be gotten to if you have good punching power. The other thing that I think happened in this fight was Benavidez just in some ways made it look easy when it wasn't. I mean, you could see his face was all welted up. He got buzzed at one point. And he got dropped in towards the end of the fight, even though the point got negated by the point deduction. But he got put on his ass and he got buzzed in this fight. And people are talking like he dominated the fight. So he's a great fighter who's making difficult things look easy because he is relentless. He's fucking relentless. Now, the one thing I noticed in this fight, Nibs, that we haven't entirely seen from him, I felt like he was a little bit more one punch at a time in this fight. And I can't tell if that was strategic or if that's the new weight, but we've seen him traditionally be a combination puncher in most of his fights. And he was sort of, sit down and throw one good one, reposition, throw one good one. But there was kind of a lacking in combination punching. And I feel like against Bivol, against Beterbiev, he's going to need those things. He can't go one shot for one shot with Arthur Beterbiev. So if there was anything like that you could go back to the drawing board and work on for Team Benavidez, that would be it for me.
I see what you're saying because it's Benavidez. He was throwing combinations, but he wasn't throwing the combinations we're typically used to seeing him throw. Right? I think that was part of the game plan for Morrell. I don't think it's indicative of him changing his style or any of those other things. I think, hey, for David Morrell, for us to win against this guy, this is what we're going to do. And it worked. And I think that because they needed David Morrell's respect early to keep him off their ass. As we saw with when Morrell landed, he buckled Benavidez. It wasn't like, you're fighting a guy who's uber talented but soft-fisted, maybe like a Caleb Plant. All respect to Caleb Plant, he doesn't hit anywhere near as hard as David Morrell does, right? Uber talented guy,
pretty hard though.
Not as right, not throwing as hard as punches. David Morrell is, again, he's an otherworldly talent. What I think he needs is a better corner, a better team to get him prepared to fight the superstars or the elite at the level that he's fighting at. When you're at 168 and you can just bully everybody, and you're 1,000% more talented than everybody, it looks easy. At 175, we got some dogs up and down the top 10. I think we can all agree to that. But that top 5 is rarefied air, and he fucked around and found out David Benavidez. Although I think Morrell is more talented, David Benavidez was the better boxer, right? And can hit just as heavy as you can. So I think Morrell is going to figure it out. And I think this was a good lesson for him early in his career. People forget he's only 12 fights in, right? So It's not like he doesn't have time to
there's some layers that he's going to have to develop because he's got all like the eye test tools. Like you see the hand speed, you see the power, you see he's got beautiful footwork. He's got like all the pieces that you'd want. It's just a matter of developing a little more depth to his game.
And now we know he's got a hell of a chin because David Benavidez landed some shit. Morrell's got some chops, bro.
And hard. I mean, listen, I think it at a certain point, part of the high guard thing, I think, once you've been taking shots for a couple rounds, you just start to become resigned to taking shots on the glove because you're losing your legs. It's more subtle than making the decision, I'm going to stand here with my hands up. David Benavidez kind of beat him into that gradually, but he never checked out of the fight.
Never.
He always got his get back, and he always, he maintained the competitive edge throughout the fight, which I have to give him a lot of credit for. In terms of Benavidez potentially fighting the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol, as great as this performance was, at the moment, it's a little tough for me to favor him against either of those guys, and I'll tell you why. And by the way, I think that's the fight he deserves. He deserves the big fight. But when we talk about, the individual shots he's throwing in this type of fight, you're going to have to be a little bit more colorful, I feel like, to hang with somebody as smart as Bivol, and you're going to have to be a little more unpredictable for somebody like Beterbiev. So at the moment, I think they're 50-50 fights. I would lean towards the other two guys, but how do you see those matchups playing out?
I think against Bivol, considering what I saw against Beterbiev, I think he's got a better chance of beating Bivol than he does Beterbiev. I think because Beterbiev isn't going to just high guard it all day and take your shots. And he's got slick enough defensive movement. He's there to be hit, but he's slick enough to where even when you're landing your punches, you're not landing them full flush on. And we've all seen his power. It's ridiculous, right? Like, so, and he's got power in both hands, not just not just his power punch. So, his jab can knock most people down. So I think he'd have a rougher time against Beterbiev. I think if Bivol does what Bivol normally does, right? What we didn't see him do against Beterbiev, he could box circles around Benavidez. But again, that's if he does what he normally does.
Well, I felt like he fought a pretty standard fight for him against Beterbiev. He was able to maintain his distance, keep it behind his jab, and Beterbiev is just a great fighter who was able to offset some of that. But I felt like it was a relatively like traditional Bivol performance.
He wasn't able to control Beterbiev, I guess is the point I'm making.
Sure.
Like when we saw him against Canelo, he was able to control pretty much everything, right? Mm-hmm. Against a come forward, heavy-handed, super athletic guy, he was able to just walk circles around him all day. I think Bivol could do the same to Benavidez. Beterbiev is a different beast, but I think the reason I say Benavidez would have a better chance is I think he's Beterbiev light, right? Mm-hmm. In his approach to the fight. So if he can apply that kind of pressure to Bivol, I think he can get a similar result. Against Beterbiev, I think a Beterbiev's just a better version of what Benavidez does, right?
Yeah,
but Father Time is So it's like, which one of these versions do you like more? Right now, I'd have to go with Beterbiev because of his dominance. I thought in the Bivol fight, even though I thought that was a really close fight. So I would say all that to say I would take Benavidez against Bivol. I would not give him a shot against Beterbiev, to be honest with you.
And
at this point,
regardless, the fact that these two guys are now at light heavyweight makes light heavyweight a substantially more interesting weight class, because outside of Bivol and Beterbiev, who are sort of just a head above the rest, what is there really? There's guys like Anthony Yarde. There's potentially the winner of Callum Smith and Josh Buatsi. There's some good fighters, but there's really no other stars. And now I feel like we have two other stars to kind of throw in the mix of a sleepier weight class.
And here's the thing. Anthony Yarde gave Beterbiev all the business he could handle. You know what I mean?
Right. He's a good fighter, bro. I give Anthony Yarde a lot of credit.
So it's like, you guys, but again, to your point, it was one of those things where Anthony Yarde had his shot, and he had a window this wide open to do something, and he shot his shot, and Beterbiev's was just better. So but I mean, you're right. Like outside of Anthony Yarde, there's pretty much a cliff after him. You know what I'm saying? When you're looking at the top of the top as far as talent is concerned. So yes, having Morrell, Benavidez, guys like Yard. I mean, you got Caleb Smith, some guys still hanging around. But I think that even Morrell in this loss, right? He's an interesting opponent for either of those two guys. Like I'd love to see Morrell in with Bivol or Benavidez or Better Beef. Hell, I'd love to see Morrell and Benavidez running back. Maybe not right now, but a couple fights down the line, who's to say that wouldn't be a humongous fight? If they're both able to get straps again.
I
It's,
also do
it's
think the winner of Callum Smith and Buatsi on this Saudi card will kind of solidify themselves as the fifth man, the sixth man kind of deal. And maybe that's who we see Morrell in with next. At least those are the kinds of fights I want to see him in with. It's some of the fights that maybe he skipped on his way to Benavidez.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Benavidez's option to give up on the whole Canelo business paid off after what you saw this weekend?
I think so. I think he's very quickly establishing that he does not have to define his legacy on whether or not that fight happens. There's other great fights for him at light heavyweight now. And he's already said, if I can't make this Better Bivol fight happen, I'm just going to move up to cruiser and fight Zordo. So I think he's kind of made up his mind of like, I'm here to make good fights. If one guy doesn't want to make a good fight, I'm going to go find another good fight. And that's part of what I love about David Benavidez, bro. There's a lot of, and I've been talking about this for weeks, right? With our guys, with American fighters, there can just be a lot of bullshit to making a fight. And David Benavidez makes it easy. And, it's refreshing. And it's guys like him, guys like Bam Rodriguez, guys like Keyshawn Davis, that are keeping us relevant right now.
And what's crazy is with all that hype, with all that we just talked about and the accolades that we've thrown on both of these fighters, the winner and the loser, they weren't even the best fight on the card this weekend. Like, you know what I mean? It's you look at it and it was a high level fight. You're talking about, again, we got two of the best at 175, right? You got two of the best in pretty much any division, right? These are, I think Benavidez and David Morrell are pound for pound level talent guys. You know what I'm saying? And they didn't even give us the best fight. This was actually a very loaded card, and there were fights on there that I think we definitely got to get into, my guy.
Well, I will say this one, the main event was my favorite just because the skill level was so high. Fights like that and Better Bivol, that's the shit that really gets me excited. But let's jump in real quick. Stephen Fulton getting a very dominant decision over Brandon Figueroa in a way that I think surprised all of us, right? I mean, ultimately, I think I was expecting a similar fight to the first one where maybe Figueroa does a little bit better than the first time. And what we got was the opposite, man. Fulton giving him a boxing lesson, having one of his best performances, simultaneously, in my opinion, Figueroa having his worst performance, not able to find his range, no snap on his shots, looking kind of lost in the ring. And some of that is Fulton, without a doubt. And some of that, to me, just looked like a guy who's fighting it the wrong way, who fights less than once a year. And, shout out to Fulton for coming back from that Inoue fight and really making himself a force at featherweight now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I expected the first fight 2.0. That's exactly what I expected, right? I was expecting a basically around 13 of their first fight, and I didn't get that at all. Like, no, we didn't get that. We got Fulton looking like he finally cleared all the cobwebs from Inoue, and Figueroa looking like he was just there for his paycheck. Like,
and by the way, shout out to Carlos Castro, who gave Fulton a hell of a fight last time out. Hopefully he gets some more credit from that performance as opposed to people kind of shitting on Fulton for it.
And my thing is this, right? When you're a champion, when you have a strap, you've got to fight like you're a champion. I didn't see that from Figs, bro. I didn't see the championship heart. I didn't see, hey, this is my belt, this is my legacy, and this is what I'm fighting for. It just it looked really dry. It looked really flat, like uninspired. And this is
No juice.
again, this is the one guy that's a blemish on your record. Like all of the things you need as inspiration for a fight were there for him. He's defending his belt. He's the bigger guy now, right? Technically speaking, for this time around, you've got all the inspiration you need, and it looks like you were. It looks like he thought he was fighting some dude off the street.
But
you
but
know,
this is the
it,
reality, right? We can say, "Oh, this is what we think you should have done," and you're right. But at the end of the day, activity matters. Activity matters, bro. And they said it had been, whatever, damn near 300 days since his last fight. And you look before that, and it's almost a year before that last fight. So you look at the last 2 or 3 years, and getting in the ring is rare for Brandon Figueroa. And that's
Mhm.
true of a lot of PBC fighters. And when you just aren't active, there's always that chance that you come out and you fight a really skilled former champion who's motivated, who has a great game plan, and who's not going to let you exchange in the pocket the same way he did the first time. And you're too flat to do anything about it. You know what I mean? And that was what I saw.
Mm. I, I I push back on that a little bit, and the reason I do is because we've seen people at the elite level do it, and it doesn't look like they're missing a beat. I think it's not necessarily so much him having a fight a year apart. It's what are you doing in between those fights outside of the ring, right? Somebody needs to be on your if you're not motivated yourself to be in the gym every day like you're going to have a fight, right? Then somebody needs to be somebody in your team on your team or in your corner needs to be on your ass like, hey, look, this is what it takes to be an elite level guy. We might not have a fight signed up. We might not be getting the fight we want. We might, PBC might be having this issue or that issue, but it's up to us, right, as the fighter and as the team to stay ready. Because when you stay ready, you don't have to worry about looking flat, right? Even if he'd have lost, but he'd have looked like he was ready or sharp, right? We wouldn't be having as much of a critique about it. Be like, okay, well, he gave us, kind of similar to what he gave us the first time around. Fulton was just a better
Right.
guy,
Fulton just did his thing.
right? He didn't look like he was ready for the fight. That's the so and you can do that without having an actual in the ring experience. That's all I'm saying, and that's my only pushback on that. I do believe there is something to that, and a lot of these guys, if they don't have something lined up, if they're not fighting 2 or 3 times a year, right, they do succumb to the things outside of the ring. They don't get, they aren't as ready as they should be, and this is the result,
Well,
bro.
even the best in the biz, right? You look at Terrence Crawford's last performance against Madrimov. Good performance, but definitely
Mm-hmm.
not his best. And in my mind, it's hard to avoid how infrequently he fights. And I just think that's a conversation that specifically our guys in the States need to start having is fighting once a year is not going to cut it. People aren't going to care. They're going to forget about you. Your skills are going to erode. And I feel like we're watching it happen all the time. And fighters in other countries don't have this problem as much. And that's kind of because they're just athletes. They just make fights. They're not social media personalities. They're not doing all this multitasking. There's just a lot of bullshit when it comes to our guys, bro.
I think a lot of that too has to deal with the fact that this is the only way those guys make put food on the table, right? So when this is your only source of income, literally for most guys on, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but for those guys that you're talking about, this is their only source of income. So yeah, to my point, they're in the gym every day. Every fight for them is like, hey, this is the biggest thing because it's the only thing. Guys on stateside, right? We've gotten into the prima donna stage, right? Everybody wants to be Floyd. right? And it's still a thing, right? We're kind of starting to get out
That
of
shit
that.
is so outdated. I mean, boxing is just gonna move on without us. We're watching it happen, bro.
But it's the thing. People don't understand what Floyd and Manny and all these guys had to go through to get where they're at now. Floyd wasn't always, Money Mayweather. He got that once he got to a certain level. But all these guys now want to be that out the gate. So, like you said, they've got the social media. They've got, a lot of them are doing movies now or getting
Right,
into other
but then they
things.
don't
Yeah.
fight. Then they don't fight for a year and a half, and they have a flat performance, and they're still acting like they're entitled to some kind of big fight or that their value is
Yep.
X and Y. Meanwhile, Better Beef and Bivol, they just make a rematch real quick. Tyson Fury and Usyk just make a rematch real quick. You know what I mean? I don't remember, as big of a star as he is, there's not really a lot of bullshit in terms of Anthony Joshua making a big fight. So
Nope.
I do start to feel that it's kind of an exclusively us thing right now, where we're
It is.
living in this post Mayweather era, and the rest of the world, the rest of the boxing world has very much moved on and moved forward. And that's also part of the Saudis, being able to come in and take over the game, because what are we bringing right now?
But
PBC does 5 shows a year.
everybody wants to be able to be a superstar without putting in the work, right? Again, everybody wants to be Mayweather, but nobody wants to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning running and in the gym like he was. People forget that part. You know what I mean? There's a recipe to the soup. You don't just show up and it tastes delicious, right? They back there cooking first.
It's also fighting your way to that desired value. You have to hit that value with quality performances. Like a perfect example of this, I hate picking on him, is Teofimo Lopez, bro. I mean, I don't know where this kid gets off with how he approaches, like what he thinks his value is. I can't. The last time he had a performance that really blew my mind, it was against a guy that was so injured, and he could easily have 5-6 losses on his record, easy, if the politics of boxing were not in his favor in those moments. So it's just like, listen, bro, the more you just aren't in the ring, the more I lose interest. It's not like I'm sitting around thinking about you, Bubby. You got to actually fight.
Right.
Yoda says AJ might be fighting Bacoli. Oof,
That's dangerous.
that's gonna be a tough night for AJ, boy. I tell you what.
That's dangerous. And Bacoli's dangerous for anybody
Yeah, that boy's a
right
problem
now.
for sure. Isak
Ask Darren
Cruz,
Anderson.
Isak Cruz and Angel Fierro, a fantastic fight of the year type of fight where Pitbull Cruz, like we've both been saying, if you give him those windows to punch, if you stand in front of him at all, he's a fucking problem. If you don't give him that, there are probably 5 or 6 guys at 140 that will outbox him. But everybody else, I think, is going to get a whooping.
Bro, this reminded me of what was it? Alvarado and Brandon. When they fought, this was that kind of fight, right? There just wasn't a strap on the line. You know what I mean? This was that for me because it was just like every window, even the windows that weren't there, these guys were throwing punches through. You know what I'm saying? Fierro, my hat's off to him. He has gained a fan in me. I didn't really know much about him, to be honest with you, before the fight. I watched a couple of his fights on YouTube just to see, what he looked like, why he was getting the opportunity. Now I know, because let's be real clear. Pitbull was in his chest early and throwing bombs early, right? And a lesser fighter would have just wilted under the pressure and gone away. Fierro said, okay, cool, bet. Take this with you. You know what I'm saying? And he had Pitbull hurt a couple of good times. And a couple of times I thought he might be able to stop the fight. It was a classic Mexican war, bro. There was no defense. It was all offense. All
Cruz had
gas,
some
no breaks.
defense. Cruz has a little bit of defense where he rolls with shots. He moves his head a little bit. Fierro is a little bit of a defense-free zone. I'll be honest. But he's the first guy. I mean, this is a man who went 12 rounds with Tank Davis and didn't get wobbled. And Angel Fierro wobbled Pitbull Cruz in this fight in a way that we have not seen previously. So I think it only helps him to elevate him as a high quality, TV friendly action fighter. Whereas with Pitbull, he's developing this kind of Arturo Gatti, Orlando Salido cult like following, that I think as long as he continues to put on these kinds of shows, people are going to show up for him. And if and when he gets in the ring with a Richardson Hitchens or a Jack Catterall or an Arnold Barboza, it's probably not going his way. But outside of that, I think he'll be a guy who just has too much hustle. Now, I will say at 140, I don't know if he's as destructive of a puncher. I mean, it didn't look like anything he was landing had any kind of effect on Fierro, and I can't tell if that's just a testament to him or, if it is that he's kind of hit a size ceiling.
I think Fierro is a bad boy. I think he's even in this loss, I don't think it affects him negatively in any way, right? I think this loss actually helps is going to help him, in his matchmaking process. But I think Fierro is just a much badder boy than we thought or gave him credit for. But I would also say that, yeah, at 140, Pitbull's small. He's small in pretty much any weight class he's in because he's only 5'4". But I think that at 130, 135, that was where he was best or the most destructive, right? That's where he's dangerous in at any weight he's been at, as he's proven. But you're right. I really don't give a shit about that. I actually kind of like the fact that he's not knocking everyone out at 140 because we get to see more of that, right? We get to see more punches thrown. We get to see like you said, the Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward type stuff. Give me that all day, right? I would love to. Pitbull's one of those guys that if he's on the card, it's going to be an entertaining fight, right? I mean, he had the one stinker, last time out, but look, him and Fierro, bro, give me.
But
I'm
also,
watching that
Raio's not really getting the credit or the benefits of that win that he should. And that's kind of the thing that stuck out to me is like, because Pitbull's entertaining and has this following, he's just sort of going to move on, and that fight will be assessed as like from Pitbull's perspective, whereas Raio's still kind of waiting around. And I just don't think that's right.
I think that's more of a Raio thing, right? I think Raio's looking for a bigger payday or a bigger payoff from his win over Pitbull. Where Pitbull, to your point, right? He's one of those guys that just wants to fight. He just wants to fight, and he doesn't care, about all that fancy shit. Hey, give me an opponent, give me a paycheck, let me go out there and do my thing,
and I'll get the fans screaming. Yeah,
bet. You know what I'm saying?
Yoda says, why does Benavidez deserve a fight with Canelo over Billy? Well, because they're different weight classes now, right? So that's really the big thing in terms of, Benavidez moving up to light heavy. Just prior to that, he had wins over Boo Boo Andrade and Caleb Plant, and was, I would say, the most significant and exciting contender at super middleweight. It was just sort of a no-brainer that Canelo would fight him, and he didn't. And Billy, though, is a mandatory for multiple of Canelo's belts. So, and Billy certainly has an argument for that fight. And it seems like that may be a fight that happens next in May.
Yeah, I think Billy's earned his way into a title fight, obviously. But to say that he deserves it more than Benavidez would just kind of be asinine. I think that David Benavidez has proven over and over and over again that he deserves big money fights. He deserved, like you said, the Canelo fight when he was still at 168. So why wouldn't he deserve it again at 175? Canelo's always talked about having a rematch with Bivol at 175 because he wants to avenge that. Well, if you're willing to fight Bivol at 175, why not fight Benavidez?
I'll give you honestly what I think the answer is. I think it's because there's guys at a certain size that he's just not going to fight. So I'm not saying he's ducking anybody, but like he's not fighting Diego Pacheco. He's fighting Edgar Berlanga. That's a big size difference, right? Pacheco's 6'4". Munguia is not a super big guy at 168. So he's fighting, and then of course he takes the Kovalev fight, but Kovalev was just, a little compromised. So I just think there's guys at a certain size, a certain skill level, he's just not going to touch him at this point in his career. That's my opinion. September 13th, ITR in Vegas. Well, we'll find out. What fights happening in Vegas September 13th, Bean? Let us know. Moving on, while hopefully Bean gets us an answer for that, Jesus Ramos got a very impressive dominant stoppage win over Jason Rosario, I believe in round 9. Dominates every round, boxing a beautiful fight, counter punching, body punching, front foot, back foot, you name it. Jesus gave us, some beautiful, beautiful variety. Oh, Bean saying Canelo Crawford. All right, well, once we see some confirmation on that, that's when I'll believe it when I see it. But Ramos doing a beautiful boxing lesson on Rosario, who was shockingly, in my opinion, durable in this fight. We've seen Rosario stopped multiple times in his career, badly stopped with a body shot from Jermell Charlo. I did not expect him to be that game, but he was that game. However, he was outclassed. I would even go so far as to say it was a mismatch. And I think that Bob Santos should have stopped the fight earlier than he did, because now, should Rosario want to fight again, it feels like, what he'll have in those fights is going to be more limited, because he took a thorough beating in this fight, unfortunately. But in terms of Jesus, 23 years old, he's 22-1 with 17 knockouts now. In my opinion, if we're talking about fighters under 25, he's one of the 5 most impressive in the whole sport right now, but still opening cards like this, right? Which was a little surprising to me. It seems like Jesus is at a level where he would have occupied the co-main event in maybe a bigger fight. But what do you think it is, Nibs? Why is it that, as much as we at ITR and so many of the fans see the talent in Jesus Ramos, we're not seeing him in the kind of fights that, get us excited?
I just wanted, before I respond to that, to respond to Beans. It does look like the Ring magazine on their website has hinted at contracts being signed between Bud and Canelo for September 13th. They say that a contract has been agreed upon. So that's the Ring magazine. I haven't seen any other publications that have confirmed it. They're all reacting to the news, but none have confirmed. But the Ring is saying that they've confirmed that those talks were in place. But to answer your question, first off, Rosario should walk away from the world of boxing as quickly as he possibly can as a fighter. I do think he would have some value to the world of boxing, maybe as, in a training capacity, and helping other guys get ready. But as far as being at least on the level, on the elite level, if he wants to stick around at a club level or just, get some cash here and there, I won't be mad at him. But his time or his window of opportunity to make something happen at the elite level is just it's come and gone, and it's whistling Dixie. I will say this though. The stoppage to me was premature, and I get it. We're in a time frame where protecting fighters is an all-time high. But the guy's on his feet. He's throwing punches back. He's not, looking punchy. He's not doing the whole, do all this. You know what I'm saying? He's actively defending himself. He's actively throwing punches back. Yes, is he taking a beating? But guess what? That's boxing, folks. The stoppage to me was premature. Was it needed? Maybe.
I'll be honest. I didn't have as much of an issue with the stoppage, and maybe that was partly because I felt like Bob Santos should have already stopped the fight, just because he wasn't really landing much of anything. There was no sign, that he was going to be able to turn that fight around. So it felt like the corner's obligation. But there was a stretch in that last round where he wasn't answering. He was just taking him on the gloves and taking it on the body and getting hit really clean for the majority of the
But
time.
he
And
was
so
still standing up and defending himself, Dakota. This is boxing.
I think
It's not patty cake, bro.
defending yourself, I think, is relative. If you take 6 clean shots in a row after a 9-round beating, is that defending yourself? I think that's maybe where we disagree.
It okay. I guess if after every punch he took, if he dropped his hands and was just a sitting duck, I could see it. But after every shot, his hands are still up. He's still trying to move. He's actively defending himself. This is boxing. This is what they sign up for, right? This isn't patty cake. This isn't,
I'm
Baker's
not,
man.
and you know me, bro. I'm not asking for patty cake.
Yeah.
I'm just asking you got to show some kind of sign that you're there with the ability to compete. And I didn't feel like he was showing that.
I guess my question is then when does it stop? Right? When when do we ever I've resigned myself to the fact that we're never going to get any of these late comeback fights where a guy is completely getting worked and then comes back and wins the fight with a knockout
Well,
late again, because
on the
that shit doesn't
prelim,
happen anymore because they stop. Yeah, I get where you're going with that, but they
it
don't
happened
give
on that
guys.
card, Nibs. It happened on the same card, so you can't say it doesn't happen.
But that's the point I'm making. If this guy is actively defending himself, yes, he's taking a beating, but who's to say, right, that he couldn't have come back around and landed that one punch? It might have looked completely unlikely at the time, but until it happens, you never know, right?
We've both watched enough boxing to know that there's a difference between somebody who's winning a fight big, but the loser's still competing, and somebody's winning a fight big and the loser has really lost any chance. And this was one of those fights to me. I think if you go back and watch it again, man, name 3 different times that he landed a clean headshot. I mean, he had no offensive scheme the entire fight, bro. It was just clean shot after clean shot. There was not one competitive moment of that fight. And I felt like because the corner, put it off, stopping the fight themselves for 3 or 4 rounds, that the ref said, listen, if he's going to get hit 6 times clean, just because he's got his hands up doesn't mean he's defending himself. You know what I mean? The hands up was a passive stance at a certain point to me.
I guess I would have felt better of it, and maybe he did, and I just didn't catch it. If the ref had gone to the fighter at some point and said, "Hey, you got to show me something, or I'm stopping."
He did it in the corner the round before. He went over. He was like, "You guys."
I guess I didn't catch that. I didn't catch that part. So if he did that and Rosario still just not doing anything back, I get that because you got your warning. You got, hey, look, I get, you're a defensive guy, but you got to show me something. And then if he doesn't show you something, okay, I get it. I didn't hear that part, so excuse my ignorance. But if you're actively defending yourself, and I've said this over and over and over again, if you stepped into the ring, you've earned the right to fight your fight and to go out on your shield. That was taken away from Rosario, right? And I get it. The dude's been knocked out. This is what his 10th knockout or some shit like that. I get it. But guess what? This is what they sign up for. So I'm always a fan of. I hate when referees and judges rob fighters of the opportunity to fight. That's all I'm going to say about that.
And that's happening more and more often. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I just think this wasn't a great example of that, and the corner had let him long overstay his welcome, in my view. That they could have wrapped that up at the end of the 5th.
We'll agree to disagree, but I will say this.
Do you think the corner was right to let him keep going out and just getting whooped on?
If you know your fighter better than anybody else, right? If he comes back and he doesn't, and he's got the glossed over look in his eyes, the shit's not, he's just giving you, yeah, I can go, boss, kind of thing, but it's really a wrap. End it. They weren't getting that from him. And again, when the fight ended, bro didn't look like he was wobbled, or you know what I mean. I guess the timing of it for me, you know what I mean.
Sure.
Like if you would have stopped it after he got like completely rocked and was loosey goosey, no problems. You know what I'm saying? The dude is like, yo, what are you doing? I'm defending myself. Like I'm good, and he's and he's got his shit. He's aware of himself. You know what I mean? When the fight is stopped, that's kind of where I had the problem with it. If he was not aware of himself, hey, you won't hear a complaint from me at all. But I want to say all that to say, hats off to Ramos. Masterclass in boxing against a glorified punching bag of an opponent, but he did what he was supposed to do, right? There are a lot of times we've seen guys get the guy in there and they don't treat a bum like a bum. I'm not saying Rosario's a bum, but at this point in his career, at the level that he's fighting at, he is. So you're fighting a glorified punching bag, and you took advantage of it. So he did what he was supposed to do. I think that for Ramos, I think the stink of his loss is gone. I think he should be able to move on to other things. He's way more active, you know. Uh, so I think he should be able to get in there. I think his next fight, we're going to see him off of this whole entry level bullshit. I think his next fight should be something decent, if not a championship. A try should be at least a championship contending fight.
Yeah, I think just somebody in the top 10 of a sanctioning body. I think that's really all we're looking for at this point. I just want to see Jesus in some real 50-50 type fights. Even in the Lubin fight, that wasn't a great decision. I thought it was pretty clear that Jesus edged that fight. And I wouldn't go so far as to call it a robbery, but it wasn't a great decision. It wasn't his best night either, but he's been spectacular since that fight. And I'm just looking forward to seeing what's next, man. You watch him, you see a 23-year-old kid that's so composed, that does everything well. The commentary was like, oh, we want him to be more aggressive, but he's dominating every round and he hasn't taken a clean punch. So I'm not sure what more you could expect from a young man who's just showing you he's got everything.
I think I'm not going to cry about the Lubin fight because I didn't get what I wanted from either one of those guys. It was the complete opposite of what I think we all expected that fight to be. I think they both wasted an opportunity. I don't think either one of them should have got a win or a loss. I think that should have been a draw or just a no contest out of pure boredom. But but then I said he's been way more active than Lubin has, right? He's been way more impressive since that fight. I mean, what has Lubin done since then?
I don't believe he's fought.
That's what I'm saying. He's done nothing. So at least Ramos has taken the initiative. Hey, all right, I had a stinker, and he's turned in. He did what you're supposed to do after a bad fight, right? He came back. He's come back strong, and he's proven a point. It's kind of like the Joseph Parker situation, right? Joseph Parker had a stinker of a fight. What did he do? Didn't cry about it. Didn't complain. Didn't go on social media and do the woe is me tour. He just said, fuck it. Let me get back in the gym and beat some other guys that I shouldn't beat. And now look at him. He's back getting opportunities, right? I think Ramos is like on the end of that tour, right? Like we saw what Joseph Parker did. I think Ramos is doing the same thing. And I think he's on that last fight of the tour where his next fight will be, like you said, a high level contention fight, if not a title shot. And boom, he'll be right back in the mix.
And shout out to everybody that's been in the live chat and in the comment section and all that here. You guys are the best. If you're just hopping in, feel free to leave a comment and all that. Just touching on some of the early fights, the prelim fights, the comeback I was talking about, Christian Olivo getting stopped by Mirko Cuello towards the end of the fight. Olivo was up, I would say, relatively wide in this fight. And I believe it was the 8th round, Cuello just started making it real uncomfortable for Olivo, and he couldn't keep that pace. He couldn't maintain that pace, and Cuello was able to get the stoppage in the last round. Very fun, dramatic end to a fight. Yoenli Hernandez from Cuba, part of that new school Cuban, super aggressive guy, bro. Super aggressive, super front foot, very slippery fighter on the inside, though. Not easy to hit clean. But very much a front foot guy. He gets a 5th round stoppage over Angel Ruiz. And then Carmel Moten, right? 18 years old, getting a knockout win over Frank Zaldivar, I believe is his name. Carmel, man, 18-year-old kid. When he first went pro, I just wasn't seeing it, right? I just wasn't seeing it because he was so young. I was like, listen, I'm not saying the kid's without talent. I'm not seeing what people are so mind blown about. Now we're 7 fights in, and watching him in this one, I'm seeing it now. I get it. That not every 18-year-old, almost no 18-year-old fights in that mature and measured of a way, sort of able to take all of their emotions out of it. Carmel Moten's a really impressive young man, bro. It's just a matter of not moving him too fast, not putting too many expectations on him, fight after fight. And by the way, not just kicking him to the curb should he lose a fight and have to learn some lessons. But I think the sky's the limit for this kid. I'm starting to really understand what people are saying.
He's got the Mayweather team behind him, right? And love him or hate him, but the Mayweather teams, they're really good at picking those guys. I mean, we all saw what happened with Tank, right? Nobody was really looking at Tank at all. And he got into the Mayweather camp. Now, he got into the Mayweather camp after he was already a pro for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I think he had like 5 or 6 fights under his belt at the time. But you could say it was a similar trajectory. Like we were like, but he's got one punch. You know what I mean? He's a one trick pony kind of guy. And then you saw how quickly, he figured shit out. You know what I mean? And he became a much more high level IQ guy than we thought he was. I think Carmel Moten is under the same mold, bro. Because I think he was so intoxicated with his power early on, as most young guys. I mean, we're being too hard on him, but he's still a kid, literally, right? And I think now he's starting to get that IQ part down, and you get to learn from one of the best, and you get some of the best sparring partners. It's not just hey, I'm with Mayweather, but being part of that camp also gets you some of the best, training you can have, because everybody wants to come and work out at that gym. So being able to get, top tier championship level guys to give you some work before you got to go in there and beat up your cab driver, it makes things look a lot easier. So I think Carmel Moten, bro, I think in maybe 3-4 years, we're going to be talking about him with some of those guys we were just mentioning, you know what I mean? As far as, being exciting guys, having straps, all that comes with it.
And by the way, I don't know if you saw that, but many, if not all of the trainers at the Mayweather boxing gym on strike right now for owed back pay. So I don't know what's going on over there, but Money Mayweather needs to whip out that checkbook and make sure he keeps his employees happy. I guess the last thing we'll cover today, Claressa Shields getting the win over Danielle Perkins, dominant 10-round decision, gets the knockdown in the 10th, hurts her really badly in the 3rd. I believe now an undisputed heavyweight champion for what it's worth, albeit with the talent she's in with, she's still doing shit that nobody's ever done. Nib, what are your thoughts on Claressa's performance and just kind of where she's at right now?
First off, I just want to really quick just mention Adam Azim stopped Sergey Lipinets, and then the Monster, which is spelled Naoya. For those that don't know how to spell monster, he did his thing as well. I just wanted to throw that out there really quick because I think that was an underrated stoppage, the Azim over Lipinets, that not a lot of people were paying.
That shit was impressive, bro. That shit was impressive.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that, those two things. And then, of course, again, the Monster does what the Monster does. But I've said this before about Claressa Shields. I'll say it again. Nobody needs to really say anything about her. She's almost a verb at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like, albeit the heavyweight division in women's boxing is 175 pounds as opposed to the 200-pound limit for men for obvious reasons, right? She fought a woman who was even heavier than the limit was, allowed. She fought a woman who was much taller than her, who had some physical advantages, and she made it look easy. Again, right? Claressa Shields, yes, she doesn't have the knockout power that we'd all like to see. She's not Amanda Serrano where she's got, 30 plus knockouts, or anything like that. She's not Katie Taylor, as far as the knockouts are concerned. But when you're looking at, if you want high level boxing, high level technical boxing, if you want all of it, if you want the offense, the defense, the offensive defensive minded person, right? You get all of that with Claressa Shields, bro. She gives you everything you want to see in a boxer. You know what I mean? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If Claressa Shields, if her first name was Clarence, right? There'd be no limit to the amount of endorsements she'd have. You'd have to back the Brinks truck up next to her house, but and just dump the bank off. I think the only thing that she could do next is fight a man, and I don't want to see her do that. But I think that there's really nothing left for her to do, bro. I mean, she's a unified champion in 3 different weight classes, and it's not close. It's not like any of her fights look like she ever has a chance of losing them. She, one or two exceptions. You know what I'm saying?
She's had 2 tough fights. The fight with Savannah Marshall was a tough fight, and the fight with
Yeah.
Hannah Gabriels was a tough fight. And outside of that, it's been completely dominant. I am going to nitpick for a sec though, because
Okay.
I think Claressa wants to be taken seriously as a champion. She goes, "I'm undisputed," just like Usyk, just like Crawford. Well, if you're just like Usyk and you're just like Crawford, why is it that you hurt this girl in the 3rd round and then drop her in the 10th round and you let her go the distance? I mean, I'm going to hold, if because you're an all-time great, I'm going to hold you to the standards that I hold other all-time greats. When you hurt fighters multiple times, you got to finish them. At a certain point, you just have to finish them. And she's not delivering on that. And some of that credit you have to give to Perkins, but it's not the first time we've seen Claressa hurt somebody and not finish them. And I think that would go a long way in terms of getting people that doubt her to shut them the fuck up. Is to really get some of those stoppages in fights that you are so completely dominant. And so that would really just be my one, I guess, criticism of Claressa is her finishing.
I think she just doesn't have it. And I don't think she's ever had it. Like and I think her record proves that she's got 3 stoppages total, right? So even in her most dominant fights, even at the lighter weight classes, she just doesn't have that pop. And yes, would that go miles by shutting people up if she did have it? Of course, right? I just don't think she has that in her repertoire. And I don't think that she needs it. I don't think, because of how dominant her fights are, right? I don't think she needs the knockouts. Would it be cool? Would it be great? Would it look good? Would the casual fans all love it? Of course. But when you look at how, to me, it's even more impressive that she dominates these women the way that she does than just getting knockouts. Anybody can get knockouts, bro. You know what I mean? You hit a motherfucker one time and they go down.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I mean? But are you
think
skilled
you're
enough
right.
to dominate another person bell to bell?
And I think you're right. And I would be maybe less critical if I felt like she was actually a feather fist, but she's hurting and dropping these girls all the fucking time. You can hear it. I know power when I hear it. She's not a feather fist, So I think there is some level of like it's a tactical adjustment or a mindset adjustment that this is important to get people's attention. And listen, she's also just like a smart defensive fighter who's not reckless and isn't going to jump in on you. So I'm just making the point that if she wanted to maybe separate herself from the pack a little bit more than she already has, that might help her in terms of when we talk about her amongst other all-time greats. What do other all-time greats do? They often finish fights that they're dominating, and we don't see that from Claressa.
I think her biggest issue for me now is where does she go from here? You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, bro, she's fought everybody that she needs to. That's her size. That's another problem she has. She's not a Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano sized girl, right? Amanda Serrano can literally fight in 5 different weight classes. You know what I'm saying? Katie Taylor can fight in 3 or 4 weight classes with a whole bunch of talented other girls there. Claressa Shields can fight in 3 weight classes, but she's
And
already beaten everybody worth a
yeah,
damn
and
in
the
those weight
higher
classes.
up she goes, the harder it is going to be for her to come back down. The most obvious, right? It's our girl Shadeja Green, and I'm not sure entirely even what weight they would do that at this point. That would take some figuring out, but that's really what's left for her in terms of what's interesting. But at the end of the day, Claressa will find ways to create challenges for herself. I don't think she's going anywhere anytime soon. And I think that she will continue to move the bar, even if it's just for herself.
To be honest with you, and I know we talked about this the last time we were on too, and you just mentioned it. I do think Shadeja is really the only champion she hasn't fought. Right? If I'm being, correct me if I'm wrong. That's around her weight class.
Yep.
I don't think. I think. I mean, yeah. If you think about it, I think the only girl her size that she hasn't beaten, that has a strap or has had a strap, or that we'd be anywhere interested in watching, is Shadeja at this point. I guess then the question then becomes: is Shadeja ready for Claressa? And you're more in tune to that than anybody as far as being able to answer that question.
Well, I guess that's a great time to just make the announcement that our shoot for episode 3 of the Fight Life with Shadeja Green started this week. So you're going to be able to see just how the champ is living now that she's the champ. Expect that episode to come out in the next month or so. I'm really excited for everybody to see. It's going to be a great episode. She's a hell of a fighter and a hell of a person. I appreciate all the access that her and Barry Porter and Coach Wall and everybody that on her team has given me. I'm very grateful to that. Nibs, tremendous first episode back in 2025. Why don't you tell the people why it's so important to support local boxing?
We support local boxing for all of the reasons that I mean, look, if you've been fucking with ITR, you've heard me say it a million times, right? But again, you look at what these boxers have to go through before they get to your TV screens, right? We just got done talking about Shadeja Green. We just got done talking about Claressa Shields. These are two of the most, if not the two most highly sought after fighters in the higher weight classes in the women's division. I think it's safe to say that, right? Shadeja Green didn't come about this the easy way, right? Look where she's from. You look at where Claressa Shields literally is from Flint, Michigan, people. Look that up. They're still going through it, right? But as much as Flint is going through, they show up for her. Why? Because she never forgot about them. Because they never forgot about her when she was starting her career. If you support, so there's that part of it. But again, if you support local boxing, to me, the biggest part of that is you're supporting your local economy, you're supporting your neighbors, you're supporting your friends, and then just so happen might be able to see a guy or girl that you supported make it big time, and there's no better love than that. Fuck with us, so fuck off, man.
The message is simple: support local boxing. Nibs, great to see you, my friend. We're back.
As always,
2025 is here, and we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks to everybody in the chat, everybody tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Be